This is Talking Soundtracks with Jason Jury on the Cinematic Sound Radio Network.
Hello, my name is Jason Drury and welcome once again to Talking Soundtracks on the Cinematic Sound Radio Podcast. British composer Stuart Hancock, whose most recent work on the animated epic KENSUKE'S Kingdom helps establish the children's book adaptation as one of the most sweeping and heartfelt stories of the year. The film is a good old-fashioned adventure rendered in gorgeous hand-drawn 2D animation, with a voice cast which includes Sally Hawkins, Cillian Murphy and Ken Watanabe. A boy is swept overboard during a storm on a worldwide sailing trip with his family and is washed ashore on an island in the Pacific Ocean. While there, he realizes someone is nearby, aiding him with his survival. The script for the film was by award-winning British scriptwriter Frank Cottrell-Boyce, based on a book by celebrated British author Sir Michael Morpurgo, who is best known for his book Warhorse, which has been adapted onto the stage and also into an acclaimed film by Steven Spielberg. In November 2024, for Talking Soundtracks on the Cinematic Sound Radio Podcast, I had the pleasure of talking to Stuart Hancock via Zoom at his home in Leighton Buzzard, England. During the interview, we talk about his work on KENSUKE'S Kingdom and the similarities and differences between scoring for commercials versus his narrative work, as well as playing on the show loads of music from KENSUKE'S Kingdom, which in my opinion is one of the scores of 2024. Stuart Hancock, welcome to Talking Soundtracks.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here.
Now, how do you first get involved in scoring KENSUKE'S Kingdom?
Well, I'd worked with both Neil and Kirk, the directors, before, and also with Lupus Films, the production company. I scored We're Going on a Bear Hunt, which was a half-hour Channel 4 animation. I did that with Lupus Films. And for Neil, I worked on a short film with him back in 2011 called The Last Bell, which was a brilliant 20-minute passion project that he worked on in his spare time for years. I don't know if you know much about Neil, but his early credits included animating on Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the late 80s, and he did Space Jam and movies of that ilk. and he's a very, very talented animator in the old school hand-drawn realm. But yes, combination of having worked with Neil before and also worked with Kirk on a couple of other projects, ITV promos, meant that I had a good connection with people, various people on the project. So when the call came, it was good to get it.
How did you go about scoring KENSUKE'S Kingdom from the spotting stage up to the recording sessions?
At the animatic stage. So by animatic, I'm sure you know that means when they take the storyboard still images and they stitch it together into a version of the movie, an edited version, and they have temporary voices and temporary music on it. So I came in at late 2020 at that stage, and I had a first spotting session over Zoom with the directors because everybody was in lockdown at the time. And a lot of the early production of the movie and the scoring happened very much in isolation. So yeah, it was all done via Zoom, really. Very few in-person meetings, which is kind of appropriate for the sort of movie it is, because it's all about isolation and being cut off from your friends and your family. So yeah, just worked very, very closely with the directors over the course of about 2 years in the end, on and off, working on it. It was really good to be in at the early stage because, as you know, it's a very thematic, character-driven storytelling kind of score. So I could work on themes right from the off and start sketching different character melodies. And in fact, the very first thing I scored for them was the chant that KENSUKE sings to summon the orangutans, because obviously that needed to be animated as well. So we needed to have his tune ready for him to sing. So that was the very first scene I worked on. And that slightly exotic melody I came up with for him became used quite a lot across the score. It almost became the sound of the island itself. And you hear it very subliminally as Michael's washed up on the beach. So by the time you actually get to KENSUKE singing it, you're sort of familiar with it already, but you might not know why. So little games playing with musical themes there.
The first thing that really grabbed me in the score was that wonderful sweeping main theme. What inspired you to write such a wonderful theme for the film?
Well, the first thing I decided there was to put it in a 6/8 meter. So it has that nautical, so it has the very kind of sea shanty feel to it, because they wanted to kick off the whole thing as this big adventure. So, and it's at sea, so giving it that triplety bounce was the first decision to make. And actually, the thing we've already talked about, the KENSUKE'S theme, a version of it is the very first thing you hear as the rising phrase as you go up the sail before you hit the actual KENSUKE'S Kingdom title. And that's what I'm feeding you there before you hit the big horn-led main adventure theme, which is called the Peggy Sue theme. And it's a very traditional thing to do. It's sort of, you stick your big adventure theme on the horns and the strings and inject it into the jugular with the horns straight off.
It's still in my head as we speak. It's a wonderful, wonderful theme. How many other things did you write for the film?
Oh gosh, I've not added it up. There are lots of counter melodies within that, even that first theme that became little tunes elsewhere in the score. I think the second distinct theme, I would say, is probably the Biscuits and Stars theme, which I'm sure you've got a track you can refer to that, where we see Michael's father and his sister looking up at the stars, and it's done on the harp, just very simple, slightly mystical theme there. We have a theme for Stella, the dog, which is a 2-note theme, which was very deliberately meant to make you go, Stella, Stella. So that's Stella the dog's theme every time you see her. Very useful, being such a short motif, very pliable and easy to use across the score whenever Stella's done something cool. I could go on, but there's a ton of themes across the score that capture various characters and various themes and moods.
Well, there's a couple of cues that also stood out for me. There's one particular, it's in the middle of the film, which is beautifully animated and really, really wonderfully scored, was the Nagasaki sequence.
Yeah, it's such a powerful bit of the film, it really is, because obviously it's a flashback for KENSUKE'S origin story that we learn at last. And it went into a different animation style with the Japanese watercolor animation. And it needed something completely different because we're going to another time, we're going to another animation style, and we're about to be told something really tragic and powerful in the picture. And up till that point, I'd used the choir in a more of a textural, ambient way. And I thought, well, it's an opportunity to give them a bit of a showpiece to perform on the score. And because we're going to Nagasaki itself, I thought, well, we need something authentically Japanese. So it's actually a folk song. The tune is a Japanese folk song, quite a well-known one called Sakura Sakura, which is a very simple Japanese ditty that many Japanese will know already about cherry blossom. Very innocent lyrics. But the melody is really haunting. Very, very simple and haunting. Even more so when you get an 8-year-old Japanese girl singing solo, delivering those lines. And yeah, it just became the thing that captured Nagasaki. So I took this very, very simple melody and arranged it for the full choir. And originally there was an orchestration under it, but in the end it just didn't need it. And the choir belted that out, and the raw power was there. So yeah, we had an 8-year-old Japanese girl called Katoko who lives in London with her family. She delivered the solo voice, and the Holst Singers, who are a London-based choir, we had a Japanese dialect coach for them to make the Japanese pronunciation as authentic as we possibly could. And yeah, it really helps deliver the power of what you're seeing on the screen. I mean, that ink drop moment, I know the bit I'm referring to is just going to silence at that point, and we kind of get the imagery, and then it gets me every time. It's a real gut punch. And yeah, it's a scene that a lot of people latch onto. Yeah, sets the tone.
It got to me as well. It's an amazing sequence, and the poignancy of the ink drop.
Yeah, and you just the power of the human voice is quite something. When you need that emotional punch, just the raw performance of voice, humanity in your ears is quite something.
There's another cue that stood out to me, which was The Hunt, which to me had echoes of composers such as Jerry Goldsmith in its construction, the way it built the tension of the scene it was composed for.
That took a while. My first draft of that, I remember spending probably about 2 weeks on that whole kind of 7-8 minute sequence. It's the one big extended action sequence in the movie, so it needed a lot of thought going into it. And we needed a new sound for these hunters, these invaders, which was different to anything we've heard before. So, using the low woodwinds and the low brass, getting the contrabass, bass clarinets involved, and giving them a very distinct rhythm. The whole thing has a rhythmic drive that propels it from start to finish, because we know we're sort of heading over the next 7 or 8 minutes to something really kind of game changing. And so the challenge was to start it powerfully, but get more and more powerful as it sort of develops. And again, the culmination of the scene, I went for voices in the final stretch of before the gunshot, just playing that out rhythmically with the orchestration, but also with voices reinforcing the game-changing thing that's happening at that point. I'm trying not to give spoilers here. So the choir at that point are singing something relating to what we're seeing, but singing it in Indonesian. So again, a little bit of geography coming into play with the voices there. But yeah, it was a tremendous scene to have cracked, and it sort of sets up the tone for the rest of the score and the rest of the movie and the story.
Apart from those two great cues, were there any other parts of the film where you found challenging to score? And was there any bits of the film which you had a lot more fun working on?
In terms of challenges, there were a couple of cues which they temp scored with music that was so good, so hard to match that and exceed that. One was the travelogue sequence, about 10 minutes into the movie, where we see the boat going across the map. That was a John Williams cue originally from Empire of the Sun. which was so perfect for for the scene, and they edited to the pace of it, and yeah, that was quite a challenge to get past that. But
I'm just guessing which cue it was. Was it Jim's New Life?
yes, I believe that's the one.
How could I guess that?
Yeah. And it must be quite often used as a temp track because it's so blooming good. But the travelogue cue, once it gets going, that was the temp track. Obviously, because I have the ability to work it to my picture, I can do stuff that Mr. Williams can't do. The other cue, similar challenge, was the burial scene, part of which was a bit of Alexander Desplat from Harry Potter, which again was so moving on that scene and was really, really tough to match and get past. Aside from those two cues, I think the biggest challenge for the directors, as much as anybody, was getting the pacing of the very final scene right, because as you know, it's a quite an extended goodbye scene. So given what unfolded in the film up until that point, they had to get the balance of the emotions and the pacing of that just right, which I think they did. And for me, it was succeeding in capturing that musically was a good feeling for me. And I think it's up there with the best I've done, because it brings together all the themes and it sort of draws them together, but it's also letting them go for the final time, along with all the other aspects of letting go that happen in that final scene. That very, very satisfying to have nailed it.
Well, that film that final scene left a tear in my eye. It was such a moving sequence. And but apart from the tough temp tracks, I think you did a darn good job with what you did. And I think I must say at this point, I spoke to my friend Eric Woods, and we both agree this one of the scores of the year, in both our opinions. And that is high praise indeed, so Mr. Eric Woods and myself. It's a wonderfully superb, old-fashioned score in a good way, and I do hope we get more major projects from this wonderful work. But moving on, my next question is, I noticed, looking at the credits, that the main part of the score was recorded in Bratislava, solo instrumentation recorded in London. What was your full orchestral setup for the score, and what was the size of the choir you utilised?
The choir, there were about 35 singers, so a standard SATB choir. The whole singers are very, very top-end amateur choir in London, who we recorded at Airedale Studios in London. And we, as I've mentioned, we had Kotoko, the Japanese girl singer solo, we recorded there. Also, Dan Grasson played percussion, so I had some toms and some small taiko drums, which feature in the hunt sequence. And he also did sort of other smaller bits like tambourines and brushed drums over a number of sequences. I played solo piano myself, recorded that at home. And the orchestra we recorded in Bratislava, we crammed it all into 2 days, which was really hard work. But, we were a little bit up against it budget-wise, dare I say it, which is one of the biggest challenges of the project, because it's a low-budget film compared to your big DreamWorkses and your Pixar animations. So I had to make not a lot of money, go a long way, make it sound more expensive than it actually was. So yeah, we had 2 days of recording, really long days, with various size orchestras from perhaps 40 up to 60. Biggest ensemble size was 60. And yeah, so 2 very, very productive days with the Bratislavans, and a fair bit of post-production and careful mixing with Adam Smith at String and Tins and producing the 5.1 mix from the music as well. So about 100 musicians all in recording on the score.
No language problems in asking what you want for the orchestra?
The main guy in Bratislava is David Hernando Rico, who conducts and runs the whole outfit there. He's actually Spanish, but he's lived in Slovakia for a while and speaks the language and also speaks English. So he's the linchpin on the podium, the conductor's podium. So I'm communicating from the control room to him, and he's then translating Slovakian for the musicians. So obviously, sometimes there's a little bit of a hold up getting sort of feedback across. But on the whole, I mean, I've worked with David and that orchestra many times. So we work pretty well together.
With the wonderful sweeping feeling of the score, was there any emotional elements that occurred during the recording sessions?
Well, yeah, just a little. We all went to Slovakia for the sessions. So me, Kirk and Neil, the directors, Ruth and Camilla, the producers, Adam, the sound mixer, all came with me out to Bratislava. Ask any composer like me, what's it like to hear that first take of the first cue on the first session? And it's the most thrilling thing, because you're getting it off your computer finally. You're getting it away from your sampled demo. And suddenly you're in a room with a bunch of human beings who are brilliant musicians, and they're performing your music, and it's live, and it's everybody's emoting it, and the air is moving, and it's suddenly alive, and it's so moving. It's a complete thrill, and everybody in the room feels it. Directors tend to say that their most fun part of their work is getting into the scoring sessions, because by definition, most of their work is done by that point, and this is the icing on the cake. And that was the case with this, for sure. There were several points during the couple of days recording in Slovakia where Oh, the other person that came as well was Richard Overall, the editor, because he was very much the glue between all of us, between me and the directors. So you'd have Richard, me, Adam, Kirk and Neil all kind of sat in a line in the control booth listening to particular takes. And Neil's remembers looking down the line, seeing us all crying. At Shattered Kingdom is the cue, particularly the burial sequence. And that just shows that the music's, it's working, doing its job. It's moving 5 grown men to tears. Same time. Imagine what it's going to do to a cinema audience with that animation.
And it's good to have a film treat its music in an old-fashioned way, like having it front and center. A lot of films these days seem to be scared that the music is going to come out and overshadow what's going on and just use it as sound design. But this film knows the importance of its music and has it front and center, and it's a wonderful joy for that to happen for this sort of movie. The score absolutely deserves being right at the front and supporting the action on screen.
Yeah, so the directors were almost treated it like a silent movie, by which I mean the adaptation of the book changes Michael Morpurgo's original to some extent, because Frank Cottrell-Boyce had Michael and Kensuke not speak each other's language at all. In the book, I think Kensuke does speak some English. So in the film, the dialogue between the two is very, very minimal. But it means there's a ton of space for music and sound design and every other aspect of the movie other than dialogue to tell the story. And that's such a gift for a composer like me, to have that space to develop a strongly thematic score, and for me to be given a lot of the responsibility of telling that story and conveying those emotions. I mean, that's a huge responsibility to take on, but it's a real honor to have them trust in me delivering a score that can do that for them. I feel like I'm rarely going to have it this good again, because I've been able to create kind of a symphony here in terms of a piece of music that is structurally hangs together very well. It has themes that I play out and develop and resolve, and there's a shape to it, and there's a flow to it, and a development to it, which I think has matched the film very well, and I think equally stands up well as a soundtrack in itself. Yeah, it's such a gift to work on this, and as you say, for music to be trusted to do its job and not set back, just sort of doing a blanket thing underneath everything else. It's really front and center, hopefully without distracting, but it's leading you, and it's holding your hand from start to finish.
I always say to people, the best film scores are the ones you can play the music and you know from the music what's going on. And this score exactly does that. After seeing the film, hearing the music again, you can actually see the visuals of what's going on in your head. And to me, that's the perfect film score. And you have achieved that in space with this score for KENSUKE'S Kingdoms. Absolutely.
We're yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the love it's been getting in its reviews, and the film reviews as well as soundtrack reviews, and being in screenings with new audiences where you hear a little bit of sniffing going on at the emotional points, and you look round and there's sort of glistening eyes, and also being in screenings where you hit the final chord and it goes to black and they cheer. I've been in a couple of screenings like that. The most exciting one was when it premiered at Annecy last summer at the Animation Festival, and we were in the Grand Salle at Annecy, which is, I don't know, about 1,000 seats cinema. And the cheer it got at the end was, I get goosebumps even talking about it, because it's that final scene. You know what happens. I'm not going to spoil it. When everything comes together, and musically, I'm swelling up to that final stab, and we cuts to black. It was just greeted by the most enormous cheer, and I've never experienced anything quite like it. And it's just a sign that the filmmakers, that this whole team that I've just been one aspect of, we've absolutely nailed it, or it feels like we have. So yeah, it's very heartwarming to know it's connecting and provoking responses like that.
How long in total did it take to compose KENSUKE'S Kingdom?
Well, actually, my first involvement musically was back in 2016 when Kirk and Neil were putting together a test animation for it, back when the finance hadn't been raised. So doing a 2-minute animation test of a scene was one tool to help attract the investment and get it greenlit. And having worked with them both before, they asked me to write music for that 2-minute test. So technically my first involvement was back then. And actually some of the material that I wrote for that test animation survived into the actual film score. Officially, I came on board in November 2020. And as I said, I worked on and off over the next couple of years on the score, refining it. I think we got sign off on the final cue demo-wise in August 22, I believe, which gave me about 5 or 6 weeks before recording for live with the orchestra, which happened in early October 2022. So September and October were when the live recordings happened, and mixing over a couple of weeks after that. And I think my final actual involvement with the mix was probably January 23, when it was all done and we were in the surround studio just checking everything and just checking the actual levels of the music against the sound design. And then it was done. And then we had a couple of cast and crew screenings in January, February of last year. And then it was unleashed on the world in June at Annecy in 2023, and then the London Film Festival later that year.
Looking at your website, I did notice your musical background is mainly in the advertising industry. What do you find the difference between working on commercial and narrative work, apart from the fact you write a lot more music for the narrative work?
Well, I think my grounding in commercial work has set me up well for doing more narrative work, partly because it means I work really fast and I can produce the goods pretty quick, because the turnaround in commercials and ads is so sharp. You quite often have a day to do your demo, and that's a fully produced recorded demo, and the client's waiting to hear it the following morning, sort of thing. The most basic sense, there's no difference because it's still composition, just on a broader scale. But not to put too fine a point on it, you make more money in ads, more lucrative for what you're doing if you can get the work. But working in the broader narrative storytelling music of a film, it's far more enjoyable, far more satisfying to put together a coherent, broad symphonic score than it is to do a 2-second logo for a sanitary product, for example. I wouldn't stop working in advertising because it's really good discipline, and it can be very, very interesting and challenging and frustrating, but very interesting and rewarding at the same time. But it sort of gives me kind of that bread and butter layer of sort of not guaranteed income, but sort of a fairly reliable income, on top of which I can do the projects I'm a little bit more passionate about and enjoy a little bit more.
At Green Mountain Energy, we provide sustainable electricity solutions to help you live greener. Plans powered by sunshine. Plans that put the wind beneath your wings. Plans that save you money at night. Because every green energy journey looks a little different, and every little bit makes a difference. Green Mountain Energy. Light the future.
Colour in your garden with Peckish Bird Food, a perfect blend of seeds packaged 100% plastic free.
New Pampers are Punami proof with a revolutionary stop and protect pocket, so you'll never fear a Punami again.
I find it very unusual that the film was released in Europe, France and the UK, in the summer, and only just now in October in North America. It's a very unusual occurrence. It's usually a way round.
I think that's purely down to the distribution people in each country. With the French, they read the book in schools, obviously in French. And I think that animation, particularly the more traditional forms of animation, are very popular in France. And also, I think cinema going is bigger in France. And the French distributor, Le Pacte, they went all out to get it out there in what I think was half term in February for the French. And the directors went out for a week or so to see it through out there. And there were posters everywhere, all over Paris, on the Morris columns in Paris. They were all, it's sort of circular pillar billboards they have in Paris. Casey's Kingdom posters everywhere. And they really pulled out all the stops. And it did brilliantly. It took millions at the box office in France within a few weeks. So it's all down to how much the sales agents believe in it and want to push it, and how soon they want to get it out there. And yeah, it's also judging the market and how crowded the market they believe to be, and how strategic they want to be about when they release it. I think the strategy with KENSUKE, obviously we had a summer release in the UK, but I think they're going for a longer game. So it didn't have a massively wide release in the UK, but they're going for duration and longevity.
Now, you've had a number of film and TV credits to your name. With the success of KENSUKE'S Kingdom, would you like to score more high-profile projects in the future?
Very much so, yeah. I'm hoping it's going to lead to some similarly beautiful projects if I can make it work. There's a couple of things I've got in the pipeline which are not quite greenlit yet, but they're two feature film projects which are very, very nice ones to look forward to. One's a wartime period piece, sort of comedy thriller, and another is a sort of a spy thriller. Can't really say much about them because they're not greenlit yet, but if they happen in next year, they're going to be a lot of fun to work on. Yeah.
So you have plenty of work going on in the near future as well. Your commercials as well, so you could be busy.
Yeah, the commercials is sort of an ongoing thing. Just pitched for an animated CBeebies thing, which I'm waiting to hear, which would be a big piece of work if that came on, because that's sort of multi-episode scoring as well as theme tune scoring. I've sort of thrived on episodic TV in the past, doing stuff like Atlantis, which is, that's a good 10 years ago now, but I was a very, very happy place working on that because it was big, thematic, dramatic score. It was all sword and sorcery and fantasy and Greek mythology and epic. And yeah, I'm an epic kind of guy. I kind of like working on big, juicy things like that. So yeah, fingers crossed. I've got some things in the pipeline to look forward to.
Yes, and that sort of things produce great music as well. But especially in this case, your score for KENSUKE'S Kingdom is, as I said, one of the scores of the year. And hopefully it will get you some more wonderful work, and so we're hearing some more of your wonderful music in the very near future. Great major projects. Stuart Hancock, has been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of Talking Soundtracks, and every success in your future endeavours.
Thanks very much, Jason. Appreciate it.
I do hope you've enjoyed my interview with composer Stuart Hancock. And if you want to see KENSUKE'S Kingdom, and I highly recommend you do, it's available to buy on DVD and Blu-ray and streamed on Amazon Prime, with the wonderful soundtrack album available digitally from Movie Score Media. I must also mention here that the Talking Soundtracks theme was composed by David Cosina. I'll leave you with the end title suite from KENSUKE'S Kingdom, composed by my guest today, Stuart Hancock. My sincere thanks again to Stuart Hancock for joining us today in this edition of Talking Soundtracks on the Cinematic Sound Radio podcast. And to meet again from me, Jason Drury, take care and happy listening.
Thank you for listening to the Cinematic Sound Radio Podcast. I want to thank Tim Burton for providing his voice for all the bumpers you hear throughout the program, and to David Casina for providing Cinematic Sound Radio's theme music. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. You can find us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And wherever you're listening to us today, please take a moment right now to leave us a rating and a review of the podcast. You can get a Cinematic Sound Radio t-shirt at our TeePublic store. You can join our Patreon at patreon.com/cinematicsoundradio. And don't forget to check us out on the web at cinematicsound.net.